This video will look at responding to the 2007 HSC question 11. The churches should act together in all matters except those in which deep differences of conviction compel them to act separately. Using the above statement and your knowledge, describe the impact of Christian ecumenical movements in Australia. So which dot point should we use? That's given away in the question when we read, describe the impact of Christian ecumenical movements in Australia. So which movements are we talking about? Of course, we're talking about the National Council of Churches Australia and the New South Wales Ecumenical Council. So just breaking up the question, describe means to provide characteristics and features. The impact means the effect over time. Using the above statement means that you have to refer to the quote. The churches should act together in all matters. So what are those matters in which the church should act together? Are there any instances in which deep differences of conviction compel different denominations to act separately? In responding to this question, we're going to use the ideal paragraph. We should really begin our introductory sentence with a definition of ecumenism. It is the unity between Christian churches through dialogue and cooperation to unite rather than divide Christians on issues of social justice and Christian beliefs or faith and doctrine, to ease tensions and understand the differences in practice. Without ecumenism, it's important to remember that there is a danger of sectarianism. This isn't so evident in Australia. However, in places like Northern Ireland, where we have disagreements between the Catholics and the Protestants, sectarianism, as a result of a lack of communication and understanding, has meant violence and war and terrorism. The spiritual basis for ecumenism comes from Christ himself, because he prayed to his Father saying, that all may be one, so that the world may believe. And this purpose is to bring about God's plan for the fullness of time to gather up all things in him, that's Christ, in heaven and on earth. So the ecumenical movement is a series of activities that are aimed at promoting unity of Christian churches. So when we talk about all matters, just generally, we're talking about kind of two broad categories. The first one is issues on social justice, such as refugees, poverty, Indigenous issues, gender equality, and also issues on faith. For example, Indigenous spirituality incorporated into Christian theology. Also this aspect of recognizing similarities of faith that we have in common, such as baptism and communion, between many different denominations. Probably the most significant result of ecumenism is the formation of the Uniting Church in 1977, formed from the Congregational Methodist and Presbyterian churches. It's significant because these previous churches that had differences were able to put those aside, recognize their similarities, and form the Uniting Church in 1977. So how did these churches act together? Well, they do so predominantly through two examples, the National Council of Churches Australia and the New South Wales Ecumenical Council. What have these two organisations done to facilitate cooperation and understanding amongst Christian churches on matters of faith and social justice? We'll first look at the National Council of Churches Australia. So now we're about to describe the impact of the National Council of Churches. First of all, what is it? It's comprised of 19 churches who share a belief in Jesus Christ and a belief that the future of Christianity in Australia lies together, not in separation. So if we were to have a look at the website, we can see those member churches there. There are 19 of them. Just as a brief overview of the history of the National Council of Churches, was originally formed in 1896 as a student Christian movement. In 1926 it became the National Missionary Council. So in 1946, post-World War II, it was called the Australian Council of Churches. In the 1960s and 70s, up until this time, it remained mainly a Protestant movement. In the 1960s and 70s, the Orthodox churches joined. In 1994, the Catholic Church joined. There was a decree on ecumenism leading up to Second Vatican Council, in which the Catholic Church recognised the importance of ecumenism. In this same year, the ACC was renamed the National Council of Churches. In 1998, the Lutheran Church joined. It's important to note, however, that evangelical denominations such as the Baptists and Pentecostals, due to doctrinal differences, have been reluctant to engage in ecumenical dialogue because they see those issues of faith as differing from their own. So we'll start with the NCCA. What does it do? One of its long-standing initiatives since 1949, it has worked toward giving assistance to those in poverty. So if we have a look at this website that comes under the umbrella of the NCCA, we see that the Christmas Bowl has been going for over 65 years. You can see, if you click on what is the Christmas Bowl all about, you can see how it helps people in need around the world. Another initiative of the NCCA is the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Ecumenical Commission, or NATSIC. It works toward promoting reconciliation in Australia and facilitating connections between Indigenous spirituality and theology, and represents Indigenous persons within different Christian member denominations. So if we click on that link, we can read about the ways in which Indigenous spirituality is incorporated into Christian theology. A more recent initiative of the NCCA is the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Palestine and Israel. It's a program in connection with the World Council of Churches in response to a call from heads of churches in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is like a little crock pot of a whole variety of different faiths and traditions within each faith. And over in Jerusalem you have the Orthodox Church, Russian, Greek, Armenian. You also have the Catholic Church. You also have various Protestant denominations. So this program brings international volunteers to the West Bank to serve as ecumenical accompaniers. And since 2002, over 1,500 volunteers have served. If you want to click on that link, you can have a read about that initiative from the NCCA. The EP's mission is to witness life under occupation, engage with local Palestinians, Muslim and Christian, and Israelis pursuing a just peace, to change the international community's involvement in the conflict and urging them to act against injustice in the region. The National Council of Churches has actually grown beyond Australian borders, and it now has an international aid agency called Act for Peace. So if we have a look at that website, we can click on the NCCA link there, and we can see that this is the international aid agency of the National Council of Churches. You can see that they're in a host of different countries and situations. There's also the advocacy and campaigns where they lobby governments to live up to their responsibility to protect the world's most vulnerable people, especially refugees. Along that similar vein, the National Council of Churches, under the international arm of Act for Peace, there is Refugee Week. If you click on the link, you see that there are a variety of churches that have taken part in those activities between the 18th and 24th of June. The refugee crisis has been massive over the past few years, particularly from the Middle East and Africa. So this is offering ways in which the ordinary Christian can participate in those activities between denominations. The second way through which Christian churches are able to act together is through the New South Wales Ecumenical Council. The New South Wales Ecumenical Council has a very similar membership to the NCCA, and much of its activities overlap those of the NCCA. For example, the Christmas Bowl. This has been going for, as we said earlier, over 65 years. It enables Christians to give assistance in situations of poverty and injustice in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, the Pacific, and provide aid to needy refugees and Indigenous peoples within Australia. There is an article about the Christmas Bowl in the recent edition of Sharing, which is the title of New South Wales Ecumenical Council's newsletter. This appeared in the summer edition of 2017. You can access this by clicking the link. And we see that article here if you'd like to scroll down and have a read of that. Secondly, the New South Wales Ecumenical Council supports the House of Welcome, which is a house or a group of 16 houses in Sydney with 9 caseworkers which support refugees and people seeking asylum by providing shelter, casework, food, employment support and community connections. Again, to have a look at an article in the recent edition of Sharing, and we see that article just here. Furthermore, if you want to have a look for your own knowledge at some more information, click on the actual website for the House of Welcome to give you some more information. If we just have a look at the second part of that quote, except those in which deep differences of conviction compel them to act separately, mention of the fact that the evangelical denominations such as the Baptists and the Pentecostals are not members of the NCC or the New South Wales Ecumenical Council due to doctrinal differences. So that is another way that you can refer to the quote. This could be seen as limiting the overall impact and effectiveness, particularly of the New South Wales Ecumenical Council. Figure out your linking statement that brings you back to your introductory sentence. Write your paragraph as succinctly as possible, so be really selective about all that information that's just been overviewed. Refer specifically to the dot points and use the language of the dot points, and give the paragraph a go.